So today I am going to be talking a little bit about carving with an avocado pit and the creations you can make and some of the tools that we use when we do something like this. So I've got my avocado pit here. This guy's been out for about a day or two. I've got a knife and a cutting board, which I'll be using just to break my avocado in two. I've got some tools here. So I've got a set of carving tools, which is a great option if you'd like to try out the tools of the trade. I've also got an engraving pen, which we use with the students because it's a little bit softer and easier and doesn't have those sharp edges. So I've got both of those today, as well as pen, pencil, and a marker for doing my designs. I've got some stones if I want to do a little inlay. I'm going to show you how to put the stones in. And then I've got a paper bag for drying, and one of these is a nice little planning sheet so that you can plan your design before you get started. So the first step that you've got to do is you peel your avocado so that we don't have all this skin on there. So if your avocado has dried for a day or two, this is a little bit easier of a job. If it hasn't and it's a little wet, sometimes you just got to go around and peel off as much of the skin as you can. You can see it's a little helpful to use a knife or a scraping tool if it's still a little bit wet, because you can just slip it underneath and pull some of those skins away. Again, I'm just slipping underneath and pulling those away. Also works if you just use your fingernails and do some scraping. Takes a little while longer. Naked avocado. Once you've gotten all the skin off, you will see that there is a natural line that runs down my avocado. This is the break line. Now sometimes it works out that that's perfectly through the middle. Sometimes it's going to break into an uneven half. So you'll just kind of have to go with that. So my first step is to break the avocado in half. Now this step should probably be done with adult help, as you will need a sharp knife or a blade that you can wedge in there to break it open. So I'm going to be using a knife today, and I'm just going to find my natural break line, and I'm just going to try and wedge this in there just a little bit. Twist. It was pretty easy. I just did a little wedge and it split for me on the break line. You'll see there, you should have a little break just like this. It's pretty sweet. They fit together really perfectly. You could be making a pendant that you want the two pieces to be like a best friends thing, where you want them to still fit together. So leaving that break line just like that is going to make them fit together even after they dry. So here we are. We've got two pieces that we can now carve. So our next step is going to be to draw or to lightly sketch in our design onto our avocado stone. You might find a pencil is successful for this. You might also find you need a little bit of a sharper tool, so using a pen or a light marker might work as well. So I'm just going to sketch in my design here, lightly pushing. You'll find anywhere that you kind of indent your avocado is going to slowly start to darken. That is because these avocados have a wonderful chemical in them that's called a tannin inside of the avocado. That's where I had scratched it. I was taking off some of the skins. You can see the line I just drew across is just slowly going to start to darken color over time here. I'm going to draw my stalk as well. And now I've decided I would like to try and put a stone on this one. It's a little bit trickier to do stone inlays, so if you're struggling with this, you might want to stick to keeping it simple. If you are thinking, yep, I'm up for a challenge, then you can go ahead and try your best to figure out where on your thing you will put a stone. Now it's pretty important when you're putting a stone in that you're going for the exact size of that stone. So that's the trickiest part, is we're trying really hard to make that exact shape. So I'm going to pick a spot on mine that I can fit this guy in. You know what? I think I might even move it. I'm going to put him on the top part because I've got a little bit more room there. So I'm going to hold him in. I'm going to kind of trace around the shape that I'm going to cut out. Now this is something that you can do. Start small and make bigger. Because if I make my hole too big on the get-go, it's just not going to fit my stone. Okay, so I've got my spot for my stone, and I've got my little sketch on there. So, and I'm slowly just going to go along my lines, and I'm going to cut away some of my avocado. So you can see here, let's see if I can get this closer for you, that this guy just slides along the lines. It's pretty important to keep my fingers out of the way, as these are sharp tools. So I'm just kind of carving away. Now, other things, if you don't have carving tools, you could use at home are screwdrivers. You could work with toothpicks. Really just look around your house and see what type of tools could you utilize or could you push into the avocado. It's quite soft when it's a new stone. If it's 1 to 3 days old, you're going to have a very nice time carving it because it's going to kind of just chip away as if it was, you know, a solid chunk of butter. It's not very hard at all. If you've left your avocado out for maybe a few more days than that, it's going to be a little bit harder to start the carving process. But also really helps if you're doing details, because sometimes when it's too soft, you can cut away too easy. So you can kind of decide. I sometimes will start my cutting, I'll get most of the parts cut out, and then I'll leave it sit for a day or two and come back to it. Because now, one thing I'd love to show is how I can actually get chunks of it away by just pushing my carving tool through my avocado and then breaking away the chunk that I don't need. So I was easily just taking that chunk off so that it could look more in my mushroom shape. So I'm slowly carving away. So it's a reduction carving. I'm starting with a full piece and I'm reducing it slowly to make my image. So we're at this point right here. It's just starting to take shape. And I've just started to cut out a little bit of a shape for my inlay, which is where I'm going to put my little stone. So this is pretty important to be testing as I go and seeing the size is matching up before I go bigger. So right now I can see I'm just a little bit on the small side, which is good. I want to stay smaller and then build it a little bit bigger as I go. So I can go a little bit deeper now, widening my shape just a smidgen. And I also will note that sometimes your stone won't fit perfect, or you'll cut it a little bit too big, and that doesn't mean you can't still use it. What it means is your piece probably won't hold on to the stone when it dries, because when this avocado stone dries, it's going to shrink, and it's actually going to tighten all of those little edges. So if I had a stone in there from the get-go, it would shrink and it would hold on to it. If my stone didn't fit perfect, I would just keep my stone with it while it was drying, and then I could go back after, put in a little tiny bit of super glue and glue my stone in so that it would stay as well. So either is acceptable, and we don't need to be upset if it just doesn't work out the first time. Do you know what? That's life, and you gotta find another way to make it work. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna carve away on my stem a little bit, give it a little bit of texture, a little bit of shape. Also pull it away from my cap just a little bit, because I want my mushroom to look like it's got a nice big cap that's sticking out. So keeping my fingers out of the way when I carve is really important. So if I hold my fingers here and I carve towards my fingers, I might hit my finger. But if I keep my fingers on the other side, or I set it on the ground and I position my fingers so that they're not directly in the line that I'm carving. So it's the same when you're in the kitchen and you're skinning potatoes. You don't want to cut towards your hand because you might end up cutting your hand, so you're kind of cutting in a direction away from you. So I'm moving my fingers so that I'm not cutting towards myself. Nothing's in the way here that's going to get cut. So really think about where your hands are positioned. Really think about how hard you're pushing, because if you're pushing really hard, you might slip and then you might poke a finger, and that never feels good. So being careful is the first step to carving. Okay, he's getting some nice texture now, which I like. You can sand these if they've been drying for a few days to a week. You can go in after as it starts to harden up, and you can take a little bit of sandpaper and sand it if you want that nice smooth edge. Personally, I'm pretty happy just to have it look like it was carved. And the nice thing is anywhere I carve away is going to get that beautiful orangey brown hue as it dries, whereas anything that I don't touch, so if you take a peek at this guy, there's parts of the cap that I have not carved at all. They're going to stay a lighter color, so I'm actually going to get some different shades going on here. You can see where this was cut a little while ago is already starting to darken and get orange. It will darken to a nice brown, and if I add some oil later, it'll even darken more. So it'll look close to wood when it's finished in a few weeks. But you can see I'm loving this texture for my guy, and let's see, this is slowly darkening up. It will show my name a lot more in the end. But now I'm going to think about, well, what do I want to have this guy finished as? He might be a really cute fridge magnet. So in that case, I would let him dry out, and I would just glue a magnet on the back so that I could use it as a magnet. If you want to hang it, you need to put the hole in now, as well as check the hole as it's drying to make sure that you can still fit, say, a pin through it so that it'll work. So that's something to think about, is what am I going to turn it into? And that'll help you to finish your final steps here. But I'm pretty happy with this guy. I think I'm going to go on and I'm going to quickly carve something out of my other one that's waiting to become something. You will not be able to put a nice hole in these things after they're done drying because they will split. So if I was to try to poke something through this way later, it would be really hard and it wouldn't go through nicely and make that nice hole. It would probably crack. So we've got our design now laid, we've got our hole up at the top, and this guy is ready to go into a plastic or paper bag, where it can sit to dry. The paper bag is going to help to pull out some of the moisture over the next week or two. So I put this guy in there and let him sit.